Welcome to What's in a Game, the podcast where Will and I wonder whether the Lakers were ever good or if they've actually sucked this whole time because we really can't decide. How are you doing
Wow,
today, Will?
I'm pretty good. I have a lot to say on the Lakers. Like I can get into some Lakers lore with you, especially with this coaching news, which we will do in this episode. But I'm also doing good because I was excited for Grace being on Hardwood Knocks the other day, and a lot of Nuggets fans were on Twitter who I interact with were very hyped about that. And I'm not sure if every Nuggets fan is familiar with Hardwood Knocks because Dan is often on Serbian Corner with Miroslav, who we all love. So there's like all kinds of connections and stuff that was so fun to see. For anyone listening now, please go listen to Hardwood Knocks and subscribe to them on all of their platforms because they're one of the funnest listens and a podcast that when we were talking about how we wanted our podcast to go, not that we like steal our segments or do a similar style to them, but we just appreciate what they bring to the table. And we talked about that when we were talking about podcasts we like and what we might want to try to do. We often brought them up. How did you enjoy that?
Yeah, no, like you said, so I consider myself to be a connoisseur of content, and I've always appreciated what Hardwood Knocks produces. Dan Favale, who I went on the show with, and his co-host Grant Hughes do a really great show covering all aspects of the NBA, X's and O's. They cover every team. They also talk about a lot of the off-season gossip type stuff that we do. But the episode that I did was, I think, actually really good. And I'm not great at complimenting myself, but I thought we had a really good dialogue. We talked about the Nuggets upcoming off season. We talked about the Orlando Magic coming off season because they're also my babies and I would like that team to keep getting better. But we also talked about game one of the NBA Finals too. So you can check out some more of my thoughts on that there. But I thought it was a really good episode. So our viewers should definitely check it out.
Yeah, I thought it was a great episode. It was so funny for me to listen to because it's like all these worlds colliding. Because I listen to Hardwood Knocks, and obviously I do this podcast with you, so listening to it was awesome for me. Just and it was very natural too to see you guys talk. And I know you've interacted before on Twitter, so it was cool to see you guys connect on that format and talk some Nuggets, Magic, and Game One. We didn't cover Game One on this show. We were gonna like let the two games go and talk about what we saw, which we'll jump into in a second. But it was good to get your guys' game one reaction. We are starting off kind of focusing on Boston's defense. On our NBA Finals preview, I had kind of said that I wasn't as worried about the Mavs offense and that I was more concerned with their defense and how they're going to slow the Celtics down. Unfortunately, the Celtics defense is really creating challenges for the Mavs. They put Jason Tatum on their center. They're putting him on Lively and Gafford, which is causing problems for the Mavs getting to their pick and roll because Luka really loves to work with roll threats. The lob
Yep.
was why they were able to get this far in the first place. That is being completely neutralized by the Celtics, which is making this series really rough for them. And this might just be another case of a bad matchup and just not being able to capitalize on things that you do well, which we've been seeing throughout this playoffs.
Yeah, so this is the case for both game one and game two, how they've put Jason Tatum on the center, whether it's Gafford or Lively. And so they can switch all of those pick and rolls with Luka, neutralizing, like you said, the lob threat. But I think the bigger story of why this is possible and like in the most effective way for Boston is how good they are at the point of attack. We talked about in our series preview how Luka can basically cook every one of these Celtics one on one, and we thought actually that Tatum would be the best matchup for him, but that does wear him down. And the fact that every single perimeter defender on the Celtics has enough strength to wear Luka down when they're guarding him at the point of attack and he tries to go into a pick and roll, whether it's with Lively or with somebody else because he's trying to draw Al Horford or Kristaps into the action. So he's kind of using whichever Maverick they're defending. You just see like Luka get continually worn down as the game goes on. So even in both games, he started off super efficient, especially in game 2. Like he was just on absolute fire.
Yeah, the first half was amazing.
And I think in the fourth quarter, he only made 1 field goal. So that's another part of the defense is just continually wearing him down. But
And he looked worn down in the second half. He just like
really
looked
did
tired and
on both ends. I wanted to give a special shout out to Jaylen Brown because the fact that he can consistently have an acceptable defensive possession on Luka and multiple times get stops. In game 1, he actually ripped Luka just like straight at the point of attack from well beyond the arc twice and got breakaway dunks off of those. In game 2, he just stood him up really well on his drives because he's quick enough, but he's got enough length and just enough strength to bother every single thing that Luka does, just enough that even if Luka's scoring on him sometimes, Boston never feels the need, especially when Jaylen is on him, to overhelp off of the other Mavericks. So they can't get as involved in the offense. I know you wanted to talk about Drew Holiday on Luka or on other Mavericks. What was it about his game that you wanted to point out in the first 2 games?
Well, I was thinking a lot about Drew on the offensive end just because he was the leading scorer in game 2.
Yeah.
We were kind of talking about how he is a similar kind of makeup to Lou Dort in a way where he's like shorter and stockier and he can guard a lot of different positions. And I did think he was going to start the series out on Luka instead of like Jaylen Brown. But the Celtics just switch so much and they don't blitz Luka at all. Different people are guarding Luka at all times. And I think Drew has held up on basically everyone very well, especially Kyrie. And Kyrie even tried to like back him down a little bit or get a bump or something. And Kyrie can't get any space for his interior game. There are times where then I feel like he's settling for threes, which reminded me of Nuggets Wolves because it's like, dang, they're having such trouble getting inside that they're just settling for shots. The Celtics are very disciplined on defense, more than I thought that they would be. And it's from like everyone on the team. Because I had said too in the preview, which I was wrong about, that even if the Celtics like 3 through 5 are like, Luka's the best player in the series, if you're ranking them, the 3 through 5 are the best. Now I'm thinking it's like 3 through 8, like are playing the best, which is a team result that they're just playing together well. And it's just the fact that they're making Kyrie and the other Mavs players struggle that I would say that. But like Pritchard was holding up against Kyrie. Like Kyrie is like, you got to score on that somehow. Like, or even Al Horford was doing way better. The way that Derek White is aggressively positioning himself on the nail or whatever it is to deter certain shots. But one thing that I wanted to ask you about is the blitzing and or doubles on Luka, because we had also said that they're not going to let Luka distribute because he's so good at that. They don't want him to have a ton of assists. They don't want to get beat by the other Mavs players. But I did kind of think in game 2, they were showing a little more help than I expected. And they were more willing to let the other Mavs shoot, and they all missed. Like it was not a great shooting night for them. So did you have thoughts about that? Because we were also saying we didn't think the Mavs did anything tactically significant.
Yeah. So in game 1, it was made clear to Dallas, based on the way that Boston was defending, that Boston was not going to give up any corner threes. And also, for the most part, when Luka was ISOing, he was settling for his pull-up 3 a lot. He would get into the paint some, but it was usually kind of in that short mid-range area, maybe just outside the paint. In game 2, it seemed like Dallas was doing a lot more to get downhill, both with Luka and Kyrie. Obviously, Luka in greater volume because Kyrie has really just been very ineffectual, particularly in this series. But they were driving with Luka a lot and hunting the above the break 3 because they knew it would be there. And so they did get more wide open threes. They didn't make them. The role players didn't make them. It was PJ, it was Derek Jones Jr. Mostly who got them. I think Kyrie got one as well that he missed. Both teams actually shot pretty poorly from three in this game, but I felt like the looks that, say, Boston was able to generate a lot more corner threes, which are shorter threes and role players in particular, they tend to shoot better from the corners than above the break. PJ Washington has a pretty big disparity there in these playoffs. Someone was comparing him to, like, oh, he turned into Ray Allen for a series against the Thunder, but like all of those threes were corner threes. In this series, he's only getting the stuff above the break. When you talked about the way that the Celtics, like all of their role players, are able to have this massive impact by making the Dallas role players and Kyrie too look as bad as they do. I wonder, like, well, why is it that the Dallas role players can't do the same thing to Boston? I guess that gets into, I guess, talking a bit about the Mavs defense, but just kind of philosophically speaking, like, what am I going to do as a role player in a playoff game? I'm trying to make an impact on one end of the floor or the other. If you're not making shots, like, you need to get a stop. When we get into the Mavs defense, like I will have like very specific criticisms of Luka, but one of the things with this team is like they're very specifically constructed. Like we talked about in our series preview, how the Mavericks are a much better defensive team now with more defensively slanted personnel than they were before the trade deadline, but they're a much worse offense, so their defense has to carry them, and that's kind of like that's just like a philosophical like question that I have. Like, okay, sometimes it isn't always possible to like hide your star on defense, but like if the players that were brought into the team were there to improve the defense of the team and they're not contributing on offense, shouldn't there be maybe a little bit more responsibility put on them to continue to contribute by making defensive plays?
Yeah.
When you look at the Boston Celtics, in this game, they were very cold from three, except outside of a couple of stretches. Down the stretch of this game, they actually like were kind of nails. They made the big shots that they needed to, but everyone was cold. It wasn't just role players. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, very cold from three. They shot 25% from three as a team, but you had big plays from Derek White, Drew Holiday. Like Derek White had this crazy block on PJ Washington. This was in the clutch that would have cut the game down to three. It was off an outlet pass from Luka. Those kinds of plays were happening really throughout the game that were just timely stops. Drew Holiday forced a turnover on like a bad pass from PJ Washington when Drew Holiday was like, I'm on Luka, I need to deny Luka the ball. This was in the clutch as well. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Mavs turnovers, like you said, whenever Mavs felt like maybe they're getting a little bit of momentum, Boston defense just made a big play.
And that's what their role players were doing that for the most part.
Yeah.
It wasn't really Tatum and Brown who were contributing in their own different ways. But that's one of the big differences that I've seen through both games, actually. And game one was a blowout, but it was pretty close through most of it. But there were these kind of key stretches where it felt like the Boston role players in a big moment kept making a shot when they needed to, or getting a block. Like they had like, I think 9 blocks as a team or something in game one, which was big. A lot of that was Kristaps Porzingis. We definitely have to talk about his impact overall in this matchup. But it was also, again, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown got really important blocks on Derek Jones Jr., acting as, secondary rim protection on this team where everyone is super dialed in, particularly defensively, on every possession. And I think that's a big glaring difference between these two teams, in addition to the sort of aggregate like talent gap stuff.
The Celtics, I hate to say it because I'm not a Celtics fan, but for you Celtics people out there, if I had to classify them as a team, like organism, they're like a 3-and-D player. If a 3-and-D player was a whole team, because they obviously three-point shot is key to their identity, but every single one of their players can shoot, and almost every single one of their players can defend reasonably well. And the Mavs have not been able to punish anything that Boston's defense has been doing, as far as like making the above the break threes if they're showing help, or beating one of the matchups in ISO. Like Luka obviously can win any ISO possession against probably anyone on that team, but you can't rely on that to win this series because Kyrie can't do it. He's been struggling with basically anyone who's been guarding him. I think his reads also hasn't been as good. Like even when they did run double screens, because I saw some people asking, why aren't they running more double screens or why aren't they doing this? When they ran double screens and they just switched it, like Kyrie just passed it away to like PJ, and then he would just have to drive it off of like they didn't get any advantage
Off of
off
no
of that.
advantage, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. They're not creating advantages.
it's just not going to do it in the finals. You cannot afford to be this stagnant.
Passive and stagnant. Yeah.
They did have a couple possessions where even like setting a very high screen, almost like it was. I don't know if it was in transition, but it was mid court. Luka had that like long pass, empty side, which gave the whoever that was, gave the roll man room to score. I don't know if there's anything the Mavs can build off of that offensively, but it does suck that basically the biggest thing that they have to do is just make more shots. Like the role players are just going to have to step it up a little bit, but otherwise Boston kind of has them on lockdown.
As much credit as I want to give Boston's defense, and I do, because I do think that it has been the most elite part of this team throughout the entire season. Like everyone talks about this like offense, and they have they take and make all of these threes, and they have all this spacing, so they get high quality shots most of the time anyway. But they were second in defense on the year, and that's because everyone on the floor is super dialed in. It's one of the reasons that it was hard, I think, for some of the all defense voters to pick one player to give it to. They ended up giving it to, I think it was both Derek White and Drew Holiday that made all defense, right? But I also think that Dallas is not putting enough pressure on this defense. Part of it is personnel, right? I actually noticed in game one, the very first possession was a post up for Daniel Gafford because they had Tatum on him. And he actually forced help, kicked out to Derek Jones Jr. for a three, and they got it. He switched it. In game two, there were multiple possessions where both Luka and Kyrie were intentionally trying to post up Gafford. And some of them, it resulted in layups and dunks. And I'm always worried about if Gafford's actually going to finish anything. But he was actually really good. I thought he has been pretty just good in these games. And defensively, we'll get into the Mavs defense, but defensively, I don't think the Mavs problems have anything to do with Daniel Gafford and his limitations, actually, especially on like getting offensive rebounds, like all that kind of stuff. He's just been solid for the most part. In game one, I do think that he got bullied around by Drew Holiday for sure. But in game two, he really like brought a lot more physicality and just wasn't going to let Drew like push him around, which was a really nice response to see, frankly. Like regardless of how this series goes for the Mavs, one of the comparisons I had for it was how AG responded after the Warriors series and how sort of Draymond not just like pushed him around, but like forced him to bad shots, like all of that stuff, and like taught him how to be a smarter and tougher player. And I wonder if like this series sort of gives Gafford a similar, not transformation, right, but like outlook and how to like consistently like play tough like that, because it's a similar story, right, with Gafford coming from basically a tanking team to now he's suddenly like starting on a contender, and you have this like experienced veteran on another team that's teaching him lessons, whatever. However you want to describe it.
Yeah, the only player on the Mavs that has that kind of experience is Kyrie. Luka, obviously,
and
I'm
he's
not questioning.
He's not playing like it.
So. Yeah, he's not playing like it. So yeah, the one person you had who like has been in this tough series, but
the only champion, like he's
the only champion.
He's their champion.
The Cavs were down to the Warriors really bad. Obviously, they came back to win that. Are we going to have some kind of storyline like that in this series? I seriously doubt it. I kind of feel like it's over. I feel like the Celtics are going to easily win this, but you never know. Is Kyrie going to come back and play amazing offense and give the Mavs a chance? We will see. But I'm glad you did bring up Gafford because I wanted to talk about that too before we moved to the Mavs defense. Just because, in the third quarter, he had 2 post-ups in a row where he scored. And we had been asking, like, could we just get some possessions from Lively and Gafford where, like, they could take someone one-on-one in the post and just score? Because that would really help them.
I don't know about Lively because I haven't really seen him effectively post up anyone that wasn't, like, a guard and he gets, like, a little hook shot. So I will say on that, on the Gafford stuff, they were trying to post him up and they were successful in some instances. There were other possessions that I remembered. It was very clear that both Luka and Kyrie were trying to post Gafford up, but whoever was on Gafford was successful in sort of pushing him either out of the paint, or Gafford's not like good at sealing. So once he loses his initial position advantage, it just ends up wasting time off the clock as we're kind of waiting for Kyrie or Luka to make that entry pass, and then he can never get position, and then they have to like figure something else to do on that possession. But if he were better at that, and who knows, maybe he does as the series goes on,
Hmm. Yeah.
whether it affects the outcome of this series or not, that's maybe something like an area of growth for him in the future, perhaps, because he has been successful once he's been able to post up. But if he loses his initial advantage when he's trying to seal, then he just kind of gives up on it. And I wonder if they're going to emphasize that more or not, because they actually got, I mean, when I say they got decent offense out of it, their offense is so stuck in the mud that a Daniel Gafford post up is perhaps better offense than things they're going to get on most possessions, particularly late in the game when Luka is like totally gassed and like can't hit his jump shots anymore,
Yeah, like you can point to things that the Mavs could do
which is like bad.
on theory or like on paper, but it's like how well can they execute that once
Yeah.
they do try it? And I think with some of their personnel, some of the answers that people are coming up with, even if they try it, I don't know how much it's going to work, which is why I'm feeling pretty pessimistic about the Mavs' chances.
Yeah.
The other thing is like Maxi Kleba is, I don't know what he's providing for you. He's killing your spacing out there at the moment. The Celtics are not respecting him, so I
And
don't
he's not
know.
shooting. Like he's not giving them a reason to respect him.
Hmm.
Like, he's not even taking the shots is the
Yeah,
thing.
and then on defense, it's even worse. I think because Drew even like took it to him, and it was no resistance.
Yeah, I think
Um,
he's been okay on switches. Yeah, Drew took it to him, but Drew was kind of cooking
yeah, I
everybody in
guess
this
that's true.
game. So it's kind of like, well, I guess it's on a curve, right? So Kleber's like, I don't know, he's fine compared to like the rest of the starters. So whatever,
Yeah,
but
in this scenario
yeah.
though, where it's the NBA Finals and it's like, oh God. I mean, Derek Jones Jr. had some like he had a little interesting scoring run where he got like a steal or like he got a transition dunk or like he had a nice like cut dunk in the third quarter. Can they get more out of Derek Jones Jr. somehow? And we even talked in the series preview about the Mavs possibly capitalizing on some of the Celtics switching, like with their rebounding and such. And I do agree with you about Gafford and like how he was putting in the effort. And I did see more effort from the Mavs in trying to be intentional about those little things like rebounding and making sure you're not giving this to
Yeah.
Boston. But it still just like wasn't enough. Or like when PJ Washington's
Yeah.
airballing a three, you can't rebound it. Like, so
Right,
I don't
right.
know.
No, I agree with that. The offensive rebounding is tough because Boston, although they're not a great defensive rebounding team over, like they're not like an elite defensive rebounding team or anything like that. But there's no one on the Mavs besides Lively we should talk about this, that Kristaps is coming off the bench, and so Lively now has to play opposite somebody who is more formidable
Hmm.
than, say, one of the things in the OKC series is that Lively often, although he was still impactful when Chet was on the floor, when Chet was off the floor, Lively was absolutely crushing those units. And so the Mavs no longer have the edge in those bench minutes just by virtue of Lively being this legit 7-footer who's a really great both defensive and offensive rebounder, because they have Kristaps out there. And the other thing that Kristaps being out there for basically all of Lively's minutes, I remember there was one possession that ended in like a Lively dunk, and I think Al was on the floor. And I noted that, like, oh, Kristaps hasn't been pulled off the bench yet. He hasn't come in the game yet. And Joe immediately called a timeout, and I'm pretty sure Kristaps was on the floor the very next possession. That's something else to give Boston credit for. I think Missoula has figured out pulling the right strings on the different matchups so that you're not putting yourself in a disadvantageous position for no reason. I think the Wolves figured out later into the series, we talked about how Lively started losing his minutes. The Wolves figured out that they needed to play Rudy basically whenever Lively was on the floor. So even though Rudy was starting, he was basically playing not double duty, but bigger minutes than normal because he also had to be on the floor whenever Lively was on, and they had to figure out the rotations in that way. So it's almost like Kristaps, he had the calf strain, final start, he's finally back in the rotation. He's been out for a month. He's not officially on a minutes restriction, but it's pretty clear from the low minutes load that they're not trying to play him too much. I think he only played 23 minutes in game 2. But he's coming off the bench because Al has been starting and Mazzulla doesn't want to maybe interrupt that or whatever it is, overplay Kristaps. Like, I don't actually think that the reason Kristaps is coming off the bench initially was because of matchup with Lively. But they maybe learned that, like, oh, this like really, really works in game 1, and then they're keeping up with it. I don't know if that ever changes and Kristaps goes back to starting, but it's almost like a happy accident for the Celtics that KP is coming off the bench because they never have to learn the lesson of experiencing those bench minutes with Lively on the floor without someone that can match him there.
Yeah, that really has worked out for them. KP obviously has had a big impact on this series so far, and we can kind of talk about that as well if we transition to the Mavs defense.
We have to talk about the Mavs point of attack defense. Like, that's
that's
the story of this series when you really think about it, because if the Mavs just can't stop Boston at all and sort of mitigate the thing that I think is less elite than Boston's defense, which is their offense, although it is highly lauded and the numbers say it's great. But if you can't stop the Celtics at the point of attack, or at least slow them down, then you're going to be in rotation against a team that takes advantage of teams in rotation. And when you're looking at the Mavs defense, they're not a team that is great existing in rotation.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think the Mavs were doing themselves any favors. Sometimes I was like, you're making it too easy to be put in rotation. Like, yeah, Boston can put it upon you, but don't put it upon yourself. Because, yeah, Luka was very tired in the second half, and his defense and offense suffered. But defensively, like, times where he was just watching the ball and then letting people sneak by him get rebounds. There was times where he wasn't ready to rotate, and Kyrie's pushing him to go close out on Tatum, and then he's closing out so hard, and it's like so easy for Tatum to just get around him.
Celtics were ready for the hard closeouts today. They were basically just like, let's just keep driving and kicking until we absolutely 100%. They were actually just going from good to great on every shot in this game. I thought in game 1, the difference in the two offenses was that Boston's, all of their guys, role players included, had like a very green light to take even like semi-contested shot, first open 3, whatever. It felt like in game 2, Boston, they were very cold from 3 to start the game, and it basically carried out through the rest of the game. So for the most part, the threes that they were taking were like after like 3 separate drive-in kicks on the same possession. And, you know, Jaylen Brown is like really tough to stop when he's going downhill, especially when he's attacking off the catch in a drive-in kick as opposed to initiating. And then Tatum as well, even though we could talk about Jason Tatum as like a separate part of this, because I don't know that the reason that Tatum scored as inefficiently as he did had really anything to do with the Mavs defense.
Right. Attacking the closeouts was a huge story, but I'm like really wondering if they're going to adjust anything with Tatum specifically, because he is struggling. His jump shooting is down. His 3-point shooting is down. Is he going to score at the rim a bunch still? Probably. Is he going to hit his open shots? Probably. I'm not trying to say Jason Tatum's not an elite player, but if I'm trying to guess anything that the Mavs could do, I would say don't guard him with 3 people in the paint. Don't have...
What did he have, 8 assists in the first half of this game? In game 2?
I don't know. He had a lot, but he ended up with 12 assists.
Okay, yeah.
And it was like easy stuff too. Like, I'm not saying he's not a good playmaker, a good passer or whatever, but like when you're hard closing out on him,
easy with his spacing though.
Yeah, that's true too. It's just
like
what
we
the
talked
Celtics
about
do
in the preview.
When you're closing out hard and he's getting around you easy, and you have Derek White or Drew in the dunker spot, or just in the corner 3 or whatever it is, Tatum's reading it, and I guess he had a couple turnovers, which you can hope for, but you don't.
He had a lot fewer than game 1. That was something big, right? Because I forgot how many assists he finished with, but it was like 6 turnovers, maybe like 8 assists, 6 turnovers in game 1. I think I remembered thinking after game one, oh, maybe the Mavs keep doing this collapse defense on Tatum because they like that he had 6 turnovers. But we also talked about in our series preview how Boston's spacing makes making decisions once you get into the paint very, very easy. And so once he like learned the basics of how the Mavs were going to keep guarding him, which is like collapsing 3 guys on him in the paint at any given time, he can just throw the ball anywhere and one of the Celtics is going to catch it. I actually thought even so we're going to talk about his scoring struggles, but I think his overall play has been very good.
Yeah,
He's
for
defending
sure.
well. He's rebounding at a high level. All of that stuff. What does it actually mean to be a superstar in the Celtics? Apparently, it means that you can have 42% true shooting in a finals game, but still have a positive impact because you're guarding Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford sometimes, and switching out onto Luka and rebounding and driving and kicking. One of the things that you can definitely give Tatum credit for in this game and in game one is that he was constantly getting downhill and creating for the rest of the team rather than focusing too much on creating his own shot from the perimeter, which he still did a couple of times in this game, particularly on switches onto the bigs. However, for the most part, like he's getting downhill a lot and is sort of initiating a lot of these very efficient drive and kick sequences for the Celtics, which is allowing their offense to, for the most part, sustain a very like competent flow. They're attacking Luka a lot at the point of attack, just getting him on switches and beating him off the dribble. And Luka is not recovering to whoever he needs to X out to, usually most of the time. And it's a good game plan, right? Because on defense, the Boston Celtics are saying, well, Luka's the only one you can actually score on us. So we're going to let him get his for the most part, maybe make it tough on him a little bit. Sometimes make him throw it to the role players a little bit later in the rotation, a little bit deeper in the clock at odd angles so that it's not as comfortable to maybe take the shot immediately. And then as the game goes on, they're just attacking him on defense, just one-on-one. And it's not just like I said, in the case of Tatum, it's really about beating him off the dribble and getting into the teeth of the defense, less so than creating their own shot. And I think Jaylen Brown has really been very good at that. He's getting off the ball faster when he starts to see a crowd. And that has been another important part of just keeping this offense flowing. Every single Celtic is doing that. And that's a big difference, I think, than maybe what a lot of fans think of as a 3-and-D player versus a legitimately good closeout attacker. Because attacking a closeout can be taking a spot at 3. It can also be driving into the defense and maybe if no one's there, like you just get a shot at the rim. It could also be, beating your initial defender that's closing out on you off the dribble, forcing the help rotation and then kicking out to somebody else and making those right reads. And that's the thing is like they're not just the kind of traditionally thought of as 3-and-D players. So they're all really good closeout attackers, and it comprises every one of those components, whether it's the shooting, the driving, the ability to make the right decision. And like we said in our series preview, again, the Boston Celtics spacing and their spacing principles. It's not just the fact that they have 5 players out there who can shoot at any point. They're always, moving in different spots to create the optimal, driving lanes and space for whoever does have the ball. It means that nobody on the team ever has to make a really difficult decision with the ball when they do have to make a play, which is kind of one of the things that like surprises people when they see the Celtics have their kind of dumb basketball sequences. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, it's like, so that's why we criticize this team, is because their system and their personnel makes it all so easy that you're like, how do you ever mess it up?
Yeah. Well, that is the beauty, I guess, of this team. I think every superstar in the league would love to only have to perform to this standard of, on offense at least, in scoring, of Jason Tatum and still be up 2-0 in a series. Because, yeah, Jason Tatum's doing great on defense. It's part of the reason why the Mavs are struggling so much is just Jason Tatum. if I'm him, I'm working on my three and my pull up jumpers, in shoot around or whatever it is, because I don't know if Jason Kidd's going to try to do some scheme thing where they're staying home more on everyone else when Tatum has the ball.
That's what I
And,
said he should do.
and yeah, just trying to make him make some over the top shots.
Turn
Don't
Tatum
close.
into a scorer.
Yeah, don't close out super hard so he can just drive around you. Close out short and dare him to shoot. Yeah, Tatum's a great player. Is it disrespectful to maybe do that? Yes. Could you get burned on it?
I mean,
Yes.
they're doing it to
But
Luka.
yeah,
They make him make all the shots. Maybe he does get hot from three, and maybe that just like kills you. But even though I thought the Mavs would have to change the way they defend on the whole, like just complete overhaul. Maybe they just lean further into what got them there. Lean into packing the paint. Lean into make the Celtics make 33s in a game, and don't let them have anything in the paint. Easier said than done because all the Celtics have been cooking the Mavs off the dribble, particularly Luka and Kyrie. But if you're doing this, if you're closing out short, for example, or going under on whatever screens, although again, the Celtics, they're not a
yeah,
high volume pick and roll team. They run a lot off ball to get open. Maybe you just kind of go extreme, especially at this point where you're trying to just find something that works so that you don't go down 3-0.
yeah. Well, I know you're just saying like maybe they should pack the paint and not let anything, but I would at least like live with Tatum having to score in the paint.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
like, five people in the paint and he has an easy spray out or like has an easy dump off to Drew in the dunker spot. Like maybe you should stay home a little bit. Don't just assume he's just going to hit everything because he's Jason Tatum. Like actually see if he can do it, because that's going to help your offense if you can maybe force some misses off Tatum. But I think the series is over. So like suggesting like maybe the Mavs could do this or do that. This is going to be hard for them to come back and win 4 out of 5 against the Celtics.
Right. At this point, it's really just about like, can they make it a series? It's not really can they win it, because I just think they have too many disadvantages on
Hmm.
both ends of the floor. And
Yeah.
Luka's not, he can't do everything, and he's still got the knee stuff or whatever. And the Celtics are just going to keep coming at him. So yeah, I do think it's tough. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, and I was half joking about this on Twitter. You talked about Maxi Kleba being out there, and it's like, well, they could cook him. But someone was talking about how the Mavs have barely played Tim Hardaway Jr. in this series, and at first I agreed with that because I thought, they really like their defense needs work, and like he's missing shots anyway, so how much could he really help on offense? And who knows if the Celtics would even respect his spacing or anything? Maybe he does make a couple of shots. But defensively, I had the thought that it might be interesting if you had multiple people out there that the Celtics might want to attack on defense. Like we talked about it with just Luka and Kyrie, I think, in our series preview. Like maybe it just confuses the Celtics a little bit, or at the very least just gives them another target to go after to kind of
That's
save
not
Luka's
Luka.
legs.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
That's
you go
what
be the sacrificial lamb. Like they're not stopping the Celtics right now anyway.
yeah.
So maybe you just play your worst defenders and hope that they can give you something on offense
Put a
and
giant red
see.
target out there for them. That's not Luka.
No, I actually mean that. I
Yeah, yeah.
actually mean
It's
that.
kind of interesting. I
Like,
like it.
and if nothing else, like it would save Luka's legs so that he could keep making his jump shots throughout the game, right? And if the Celtics don't attack, say Tim Hardaway Jr. on defense, and like you don't make him a complete liability, then I mean it's not that those things are mutually exclusive, because if he's like messing up on his closeouts, and it only happened because Luka couldn't stop the ball at the point of attack, that it
Hmm.
results in a swing and all of that. At this point, let's try something, because right now the game looks pretty cooked, and the Celtics have them completely in the mud on both ends of the floor. Well, like the Celtics themselves, like their offense looks very, very comfortable and has through 2 games.
And thinking about Luka's legs and him being tired from the defensive end, because he can get his own shot in isolation, and even if it's not the ideal pick and roll matchup for him operating with people on his hip, no matter who it is, on the Celtics. Like he'll get a shot. It may not be the best one he could ever get, but he was doing a ton of little like one leg step backs where he was making them. He didn't hit every
He's
single one, but
making crazy stuff in this
yeah.
game, man.
They did also run like Exum sets, like this very weird, uncontrolled down screen for Luka that freed him up. And I was thinking, how often are the Mavs like running something where they're trying to
For
free
Luka
up
off the
Luka?
ball. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And is that beneficial? Like, is that going to tire Luka out that he's running off the ball? Or is that something that's going to help him? And
Okay.
then I thought,
Yeah.
just real quick, and then I thought, should they be doing that for Kyrie, like, instead? You know?
Why are they not running more things for the person who's off the ball when both of them are on the floor, and when only one is on the floor, have another ball handler there? And they have done that, but they're not really using them as much. I do think that like Exum played more in game 2 because he was playing better. Jaden Hardy they got some minutes in the second half because they need a little bit more, I think, offensive punch. But I completely agree. Like that's one of the things with my critiques of the Mavs offense, regardless of on if they would have like won either of these games or could have won this series, is that I'm not seeing the Dallas Mavericks attempt enough things to try to put more pressure on the Celtics defense as much, for all the Celtics fans out there, like I'm giving the Boston Celtics a lot of credit on their defense. We already talked about how they neutralized some of the little like adjustments and things that the Mavs tried, but there are other things that Dallas has just not even gone to. And when they
Yeah.
do, like you're talking about this down screen with Exum handling the ball to get it to Luka coming off the screen, they didn't go back to it. It would be like the play after a timeout, and then they'd go back to ISOs. So it's
Hmm.
like kid clearly knows what needs to happen, and I don't know if it's like a thing where the team isn't doing that stuff consistently, like the players aren't doing those things consistently, or the game is just getting too out of hand, like whatever it is. The offense for the Mavericks doesn't feel very deliberate in terms of approach. Obviously, the way that Luka approaches his isolations, that feels deliberate. But on any given possession, I'm just like, I don't know what you're doing. And it's even on the ones where I think they tried to go to some Luka Kyrie 2-man game late in this, but it was just clear side. Luka hands Kyrie the ball, and I think he had Tatum in front of him, and then Drew was kind of shading him. So like away from Luka. Luka could have flashed middle or like moved or done something to get Drew out of the way. Or Kyrie could have given him the ball and now Luka can attack that advantage. I don't expect every duo to have as good of a chemistry in a 2-man game as like Jamal and Jokic. But I've seen Luka and Kyrie do more and more creative and better things with this. Not so much in the playoffs, which we've talked about, how they haven't gone to the 2-man game as much throughout the playoffs, even in moments when I thought like this is like maybe the best way to attack the defense as a team is defending you. They don't go to it. Then the finals comes around and it's like I see it as a very viable option in this series, but they're either not going to it, or when they do, they don't really like know how to optimize it.
Yeah, and maybe it's like partly just because they know they're going to switch it. So they're like, well, it's not going to matter. I'm not sure what they're really thinking, but I thought we'd see more off ball screens to get KP or somebody on someone that can be more of a role threat. Just something like that. And we haven't really seen it yet. But whatever the Mavs do, they're definitely going to have to work for it to get the looks, because I feel like they're just deciding to ISO, or, yeah, just like their organization and decision making and whatever they're trying to do on offense is a little bit short-sighted, whereas I think whatever they need to do
Yeah.
is gonna take some effort by everybody, and it's not gonna be just like Kyrie or Lucas sitting in the corner with their hands on their knees kind of thing. So yeah,
Which
if
is what's
they
happening
yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
It's still crazy to me that they're not running more off ball actions for Kyrie when Luka's on the floor. Just like spell him. And Luka could, I mean, Kyrie is actually like really good coming off of like even just like a DHO or like a wide pin down, whatever, not just taking the shot, but he can make plays out of that too. And
Hmm.
Luka can just act as almost like a hub for the offense. And it would improve the space for Dallas for anybody that has to like cut or like drive downhill, because the way that Boston is defending Luka with whoever's on him one-on-one is pressuring him up to wherever he is. So if he can create, whether it's like top of the arc or whatever, that's creating just more space for the rest of the team to operate, and then Luka can just pass out of those situations. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just, I'm just like thinking like somebody who watches the Denver Nuggets, but don't listen to me. We're the only team that Boston didn't beat this year.
Yeah. The only other thing that I wanted to say that we didn't get to was, and I say this as a joke, but I actually do wonder, is this series more damaging for Rudy Gobert's reputation than the Wolves Mavs series? Because just KP being out there and stretching out Lively and or Gafford, because the rim protection was a huge story in that series, has really made it easy for Drew Holiday and others of the Celtics to just get really easy looks at the rim. Obviously, it is hard because you're stretched out. That's what the Celtics like to do. And they put you into rotation, so it's like a matchup thing. Everyone would love to have KP. So, but it's like everyone was kind of saying, wow, the Wolves kind of suck because of Rudy Gobert and like he didn't provide an offensive threat. And it's like now we're kind of seeing the Mavs struggle against a team that has like kind of spacing big.
I think that like people just like to hate on Rudy. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but you're asking about like reputationally, what does this mean? For me, watching this series and comparing it to the Wolves series, I actually have more criticisms of Rudy's defensive choices than I even already did. And I talked extensively about the things that I thought I just questioned Rudy about, because they're like things that he allowed the Mavericks to get in that series, but didn't allow the Nuggets to get in that one. And in both instances, it was the choices that he made in individual, either one-on-one or in help situations. Offensively, I still don't like. I actually blame the Wolves perimeter players more, because I think outside of Mike Conley, the others just don't know how to play with Rudy. And I actually don't even think it's that complicated, because it's not like, oh, well, you have to be able to pass a lob and you can't get stuff at the rim. It's like, no, he'll go like screen and stuff like that too. Like a lot of people were praising Slow-Mo for directing the offense off the ball by just like screening and then like telling whoever had the ball to pass to whoever he was screening for. Rudy can do that stuff too. And he also can act not as like consistently like a hub of the offense, whatever, but he ran some like 2-man game with Mike Conley where he like finds him on a back cut or whatever as well. And I just think the other Wolves players just don't know how to play with Rudy. I think that he can be used in multiple ways and they just don't do it consistently, again, outside of Conley. I don't think that the Wolves are like comparing their perimeter personnel to the Celtics. Yeah, it would have helped if they could have gotten some better looks at the rim if Rudy wasn't down there, say, on a roll. But they didn't run a lot of pick and rolls with him anyway.
But he's not going to be able to just stand. Like even KP just standing in the 3-point.
Yeah, no. He can't just stand. He has to be active on every possession. But that's the thing is he is. When you look at the on-off ratings, like his screening provided so much offense, and they had over a 120 offense in some of these games with him on the floor compared to off, when we know what the Wolves offense looks like apparently when there's just like a basic rim protector standing in the paint. Just because the others aren't able to create their own separation without his screens. And he is active on every possession. So I have more criticisms personally of Rudy defensively now than I did. And I was defending him for the most part in that series until the end, because I thought it was just like really bad, particularly in those last 2 games, or in game like 3 and game 5. The offense, I still don't. Because it's like, yeah, everyone would love to have KP, but it's just him. Like, who else are you getting?
Yeah.
So yeah, you could criticize Rudy for being Rudy, but he's still like a top 10 center in the NBA, because most centers just can't provide what he gives you on either end of the, like, consistently screening on every possession. He's actually like really well conditioned.
Yeah, he is.
I don't want to like go on a whole like Rudy diatribe, but you asked me reputation,
it's funny,
and I have a lot of thoughts.
It's funny getting back to talking about the Wolves and Rudy Gobert. I didn't anticipate this in this episode at all, but I just sometimes you see these series and it makes you think about the previous series. I just sometimes, people have gone out there arguing that Ant is not going to work next to Rudy because he's either not good enough of a playmaker or whatever they bring to the table on offense. They're not going to be able to reconcile that. And you want to build your team around your star and give them the biggest chance for success. And
Yeah.
You do see how easy the Celtics reads have been. But like you said, what player out there can you replace Rudy Gobert with who can shoot from the outside and still provide something on defense?
Right.
I don't know who that is, but we do
I
want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the Celtics easy reads thing. Like, yeah, it's great when you have a team that makes it this. That's the thing, is they built this team around Jason Tatum and making his life as like easy as possible on the way to a championship, right? His reads are easy, everyone else's reads are easy. No one has to make tough decisions. Everyone gets good shots all the time. But most teams can't do that, and it's still fine because the player that they have as their best player like shoots better than 46% true shooting, or was it 42% true shooting
42% true
in
shooting
an
for Tatum.
NBA finals game, and they like, or they are just better higher level decision makers than that, and they don't need like every read to be as easy as it is throughout the flow of the Boston Celtics offense, which is like fine, it's working for them. But I think it's like, man, I wish we were like that team. It's like, well, but you're not. So you have to figure
Yeah.
out how to optimize your guys.
Personnel. Yep. That is the name of the game of the NBA moving forward, and I think it's more fun for it.
Please remember to like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, share these videos if you like them, hit the notification bell, leave us a review. We're on Spotify and Apple, or not Apple Music yet. We're working on it still. Amazon Music, we are there. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.